had always thought he understood danger. He had walked through war zones on distant planets, survived storms that could tear a starship apart, and faced creatures no human should ever see. But nothing had prepared him for the jungle of. The air itself seemed alive, thick with the scent of strange flowers and the hum of invisible energy. Each step he took made the ground tremble softly, and the leaves whispered secrets he could not understand. Then he saw her. She stood on a cliff half hidden by luminous vines that glowed faintly in shades of blue and green. Her hair flowed like liquid silver down her back, catching the faint light of the twin moons. But it was her eyes that caught him completely. They were wide, deep, and impossible, the color of a universe he couldn't even name. She looked straight at him, and for the first time in his life felt completely seen, as if she could look through his chest and read his very soul. Froze, his hand instinctively went to the small blaster at his hip, but something in her stance, in the calm and quiet authority she radiated, made him hesitate. He realized she was not a threat in the usual sense. She was something else entirely, something alive, ancient, and commanding. She stepped forward slowly, and the jungle seemed to part around her. "Human, you have one chance." Her voice was soft, but it cut through the hum of the jungle like a knife. The words carried a weight he could feel pressing on his chest, heavier than any gravity he had ever experienced. One chance. That was all. The urgency in her tone made his heart pound, and he felt a mixture of fear and something he hadn't expected, an overwhelming curiosity, a pull he could not resist. Swallowed hard. He had heard stories of the guardians of mystical beings who existed between life and death, between worlds. Many said they were beautiful, some said dangerous, and a few whispered that humans could never understand them. And yet here she was, standing before him, real, alive, and focused entirely on him. "Why me?" asked, his voice trembling. He had faced alien warlords and cosmic storms without faltering, but now words seemed to choke in his throat. He could not explain why he felt so exposed, so vulnerable, standing here in the glowing light of a being so much greater than himself. She tilted her head slightly, considering him, and then, with a voice that sounded almost like a sigh carried on the wind, she said, "Because only you can." Didn't understand. He wanted to ask more, to demand explanation, but she simply turned, gliding down the cliff with a grace that gravity. She moved like a stream of silver light, and he felt compelled to follow. His instincts screamed caution, but his heart, his curiosity, his very being pulled him forward. As he stepped down the cliff, he noticed the small details, the way her skin seemed to faintly shimmer, the subtle pattern of light that moved across her arms, like veins of energy rather than blood. Every step she took seemed to awaken the jungle itself. Flowers turned toward her, vines reached out gently, and the hum in the air became a melody, soft and beckoning. His mind raced. He had survived countless battles, but nothing had prepared him for this kind of confrontation. Not a fight for life, not a test of strength, but a test of connection, of understanding, of timing. One chance. The words echoed in his mind. He didn't know what he was supposed to do, but he knew that missing it was not an option. As they entered a grove hidden between massive, twisting trees, finally allowed himself to look fully at her. She stopped and turned to face him. Her eyes held urgency, vulnerability, and a quiet hope that made his chest ache. This was more than survival. This was a moment that would decide more than just their fates. Felt something stir inside him, a spark, a courage he hadn't realized he carried. He realized that whatever happened next, he had to act. Not with force, not with weapons, but with trust, with courage, and with all the humanity he could summon. The jungle held its breath, and so did he, followed deeper into the grove. Every step felt like walking through a dream. The ground beneath his boots was soft, covered in moss that glowed faintly, and the trees twisted into shapes that seemed almost alive. Strange flowers opened and closed as he passed, their petals shimmering in colors he had never seen. The air was thick with the scent of alien blossoms, sweet but sharp, intoxicating. His heart beat faster, not from fear, but from awe. Led him to a small clearing, where the light of the twin moons fell through a break in the trees, illuminating a pool of crystal-clear water. Its surface reflected the glowing foliage above, creating a world of shifting lights and colors. She knelt at the water's edge, tracing her fingers along the smooth stones that framed it. The faint glow on her arms pulsed faster as she looked at him. "This is sacred ground," she said softly. Her voice carried a weight that made straighten instinctively. Every cycle, once in many rotations of the moons, the energies align. Tonight it happens again, and you must be part of it. Frowned, trying to make sense of her words. Part of it, I don't even understand what it is. Why me? His gaze softened, but urgency remained. She held out her hand and felt the warmth radiate from her palm, almost like it could melt the tension in his chest. Because only your kind carries the spark that can survive this night. The alignment will not wait. If you hesitate, I may be lost forever. His throat went dry. He had survived countless battles, faced horrors in the void of space, and even walked through the ruins of dying planets, but nothing had ever felt so fragile, so vital. He wanted to ask questions, to demand an explanation, but the look in her eyes stopped him. There was no time for words, only action and understanding. Rose slowly, her silver hair catching the moonlight. She stepped closer and noticed the subtle patterns moving along her skin, like veins of energy pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. I cannot do this alone, she whispered. If you refuse, if you falter, it will end, not just for me, but for this world. Felt a chill run down his spine. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, heavier than any gravity he had ever felt. He realized this wasn't about weapons, skill, or survival in the usual sense. This was about trust, courage, and connection. A strange mix of fear and exhilaration surged through him, making his hands shake slightly. What happens if I fail? He asked, barely able to meet her gaze. Then the energy fades and I fade with it, she said, her voice breaking slightly. Everything we protect here will fall into darkness. You are my only hope, human. His chest tightened. He had never been anyone's hope before. He had always relied on his own strength, on his own wits, on himself. But now, standing here, he felt the weight of someone else's trust settle on his shoulders. It was terrifying and humbling all at once. Reached for his hand again, intertwining her fingers with his. The glow on her arms flared, casting soft light across their faces. Could feel the pulse of her life, fragile yet strong, and something deep inside him shifted. He understood that hesitation could cost everything. Courage wasn't about fearlessness. It was about choosing to act even when fear was suffocating. Then I will not fail, he said quietly, his voice steadier than he expected. Tell me what I must do. Smiled, a fleeting curve that made his heart ache with something he couldn't name. She stepped back slightly, raising her hands toward the glowing pool. The water shimmered and faint ripples formed intricate patterns, reflecting the energy in the air. Feel it, human. Let it move through you. Only together can we survive the night. Only together can we honor the alignment. Nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. The moment had arrived. The warning had been given and the choice was clear. There was no turning back. Whatever came next, he knew it would change everything. The grove seemed to hold its breath, waiting for them both to step forward. His hand tightened around hers. The night waited, and so did destiny. The grove grew darker as the twin moons shifted behind thick clouds, casting long, moving shadows across the glowing foliage. Felt a tension in the air that made his skin prickle. It wasn't just the danger of the jungle. Something deeper, something ancient was awakening. He glanced at, whose silver hair glimmered faintly, as if it absorbed the strange energy around them. Suddenly, a ripple passed through the grove, and shadows moved in the corners of his vision. Dark, jagged shapes glided between the trees, their eyes glowing like smoldering coals. His hand instinctively reached for his blaster, but stopped him with a gentle touch. They do not mean us harm, yet, she whispered. The test is not out there, human, the danger is here. Frowned, confused. The creatures, he realized, were observing, waiting, judging, but it was pulse that mattered most. Her glowing veins flickered rapidly, and a faint hum vibrated from her chest. Could feel it in the ground beneath his feet, a rhythm like a heartbeat, both fragile and unstoppable. What do I do? He asked. His voice trembled. He had faced countless enemies, yet he felt powerless here. He realized this was a challenge not of strength, but of understanding. Fear and doubt tangled in his mind, but he knew he couldn't freeze now. Turned to him fully, her eyes wide and intense. You must feel me, human, not just see me, not just hear me, feel me. Only then will we survive this night. The alignment will not wait for hesitation. Took a deep breath, closing his eyes. He reached out with more than just his hands. He reached with his mind, his heart, his very being. Slowly he felt the pulse within her, the rhythm of life and energy entwined with the world around them. The jungle seemed to respond, the air vibrating in harmony with their connection. A sudden tremor shook the grove. The shadows darted closer and the ground quaked under his feet. Gasped, clutching her chest, and he realized the danger was real and immediate. Her energy flickered violently, threatening to collapse. Panic surged through him, but he forced himself to stay calm. "Hold on," he shouted, gripping her hands firmly. "I'm here, I won't let go." Her eyes met his, wide with fear but also a strange trust. Could feel the weight of responsibility pressing on him, heavier than any battle he had ever fought. He realized that if he faltered now, it wouldn't just be failure. It would be the end of something vital, something beyond him. He wasn't just protecting her. He was protecting a life force, a hope, and perhaps even a world. The shadows surged closer but didn't flinch. He focused on the pulse letting it guide him. The ground trembled again, but this time he matched the rhythm, syncing his own energy to hers. Slowly, the shadows began to hesitate, confused by the human who moved with courage instead of fear. "Feel it, let it flow through you," cried, her voice a mixture of pain and urgency. Nodded, letting the connection deepen, feeling her heartbeat, her breath, her life entwined with his own. The jungle seemed to respond, the very air shimmering as if alive. Realized something incredible. This was no ordinary struggle. This was not about fighting enemies or surviving threats. It was about trust, about surrender, about being part of something greater than himself. And for the first time he understood. He was not weak, not alone, not powerless. His pulse steadied slightly and the shadows recoiled, disappearing into the forest. The tremor faded. The grove was quiet again, but the air still hummed with residual energy. Lowered his hands slowly, still holding hers. His chest ached with adrenaline, but also something deeper. A thrill, a wonder, a feeling he couldn't name. "You did not falter," whispered, her voice soft but filled with awe. Few humans could have endured this. Few would have felt the rhythm, understood the pulse. Swallowed hard, realizing the truth in her words. He had survived not through brute force, but through empathy, courage, and connection. And though he didn't yet understand the full scope of what was to come, he knew one thing clearly. He would face whatever next challenge came, not as a lone human, but as a partner in something extraordinary. The grove, once tense and threatening, now seemed to breathe with relief. The shadows had retreated, but the lesson lingered. Had been tested, and he had passed. The grove settled into an almost peaceful rhythm, but could still feel the tension in the air. Every leaf, every glowing vine seemed to hum softly, like the world itself was watching, waiting for what would come next. He glanced at, and she was no longer tense. Instead, her eyes held something fragile yet powerful, hope, fear, trust, and something else he couldn't name. She reached for his hands, and this time there was no urgency, only intention. As their fingers intertwined, felt a warmth radiate from her that spread through his entire body. It was not just heat, but energy, something alive, something ancient, something that seemed to bridge their worlds. For a moment he felt unworthy. He had faced death countless times, but this connection was different. This was living, pure and raw. "You feel it, don't you?" asked softly. Her voice was barely above a whisper, yet it carried through the grove like a melody. "The pulse of the alignment, the heartbeat of everything around us. It answers to our unity." Nodded slowly. He did feel it. The rhythm of her life, the energy in the grove, even his own heartbeat, they were all linked now. The realization was both terrifying and exhilarating. He had never been so aware of another being, never felt so intertwined with someone else's existence. And yet, despite the wonder, there was still urgency in her gaze. "We don't have much time," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "If you do not act now, everything fades. Do you understand, human? This is more than a chance, it is our only chance." Swallowed hard, focusing on her pulse, on the light that moved beneath her skin, and on the quiet hum of the grove. He understood in that moment that courage was not just about action. It was about trust, about surrender, about feeling without fear. Every instinct he had shouted caution, but his heart told him to go forward. "I understand," he said, his voice firmer than he felt. "I will not let you fade, I will not falter." His hand tightened slightly around his, and he could feel the surge of her energy matching his own. The grove seemed to respond, glowing brighter, vibrating softly in acknowledgement of their connection. Felt something deep awaken inside him, a sense of purpose, a clarity he had never known. This was not just about survival or duty, this was about being part of something greater than himself. She stepped closer, and he noticed the subtle movements of her body, the way her energy flowed like liquid light. He realized that their connection was not only physical, but emotional, spiritual, and even cosmic. The world around them, the very essence of the grove, responded to the bond they were forming. Every flicker of light, every pulse of energy felt like it was guiding him, telling him what he needed to do. "Now, human," whispered her voice breaking slightly, "feel me completely. Let the alignment flow through us. Only together can we survive the night." Nodded, closing his eyes and letting go of fear, doubt, and hesitation. He allowed himself to sense her fully, to feel the rhythm of her heartbeat and the energy that surrounded them. The grove pulsed with life, responding to their unity, and felt the world opening up around him, fragile yet infinite. For the first time in his life, he felt truly human, not just a soldier, a wanderer, or a survivor, but something more. Something capable of connection, of understanding, of hope. The energy between them grew stronger, binding them together in a way that was both terrifying and beautiful. His voice grew softer, almost a sigh of relief. "You are extraordinary, human. Few could have done this." Opened his eyes and looked at her, truly looked, and he saw not just an alien being, but a soul reaching out for connection, trust, and hope. In that instant, he understood that whatever came next, they would face it together. He was no longer alone in this world. The grove shimmered around them, alive and aware, as if it too acknowledged the bond forming between the human and the guardian. Realized that courage, hope, and love were not separate. They were all one, flowing through him, through her, through the world itself. And for the first time, he felt ready to face whatever destiny awaited them. The air in the grove grew tense, thicker than before, as if the very atmosphere were holding its breath. Could feel the pulse of energy around him growing unstable. The glowing flowers shivered, and the vines that had welcomed him moments ago now trembled like fragile glass. He glanced at her silver hair shimmered wildly, her chest rising and falling rapidly. The pulse along her arms flickered with alarming speed. "Time is slipping," she whispered urgently. "If we do not act now, I will vanish and the alignment will break. You must make your choice. Do not hesitate." His mind raced. He had faced impossible odds before, but nothing like this. This was no ordinary fight. There was no enemy to shoot, no plan to follow, no reinforcements. The challenge was inside him, inside the bond between them. One misstep, one flicker of doubt, and it would all be lost. He swallowed hard, his hand still holding hers. He could feel the tremor in her energy, the desperation, the fragility that threatened to crumble in seconds. Instinct was to protect, to shield her, to fix the problem with strength alone, but he knew that would not work. This required trust, surrender, and understanding. "Tell me what to do," he said, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. His eyes softened for a brief moment, a flicker of relief passing over her face. "You cannot follow instructions alone. You must feel me, human. Let the alignment guide you. Only together can we survive." Closed his eyes, focusing on her pulse, on the rhythm of her life intertwined with his own. He felt fear claw at him, but beneath it was something else. A strange clarity, a connection he had never experienced before. He realized that hesitation could cost everything, and he made his decision. He tightened his grip on her hands and let go of doubt. He allowed himself to move with her rhythm, to match her pulse, to trust in the bond they had formed. Energy surged through him, a mixture of warmth and power, and he felt the grove respond. The vines stretched upward, the flowers brightened, and even the shadows that had lurked before seemed to pause, observing their unity. Gasped, her voice trembling but full of awe. "Yes, feel it now, let it flow through us." Focused all his senses on her, the subtle flicker of light beneath her skin, the trembling of her breath, the silent hum that pulsed through the air. He realized that courage was not just about action. Courage was feeling, connecting, giving oneself completely to the moment without fear. And for the first time, he understood what it meant to be human, not just surviving, but living fully, embracing the weight of responsibility and responding with heart and soul. The pulse between them grew stronger, rippling outward and touching everything in the grove. The air shimmered, the trees swayed gently, and the pool at their feet reflected 1,000 lights dancing in harmony. Felt's fear transformed into trust, her desperation into hope. It was as if every heartbeat, every energy wave was telling him that he was exactly where he needed to be. Suddenly the tremor returned, stronger this time, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Shadows flickered at the edge of the grove, threatening to engulf them, but did not falter. He matched his heartbeat to matched his breath to hers and let the alignment flow through them. "You are doing it, human," she whispered, her voice breaking with relief and awe. "You are extraordinary." Opened his eyes and saw her fully. The fear in them had shifted to wonder, and the grove around them pulsed with energy like a living being celebrating their connection. He realized in that moment that the choice had never been about strength, skill, or knowledge. The choice had been about courage, trust, and heart. And he had chosen well. The shadows paused at the edges of the grove. The tremor faded, and though the night was far from over, felt a surge of hope that he had never known before. He had made his choice. He had acted, and together he and were no longer just two beings struggling against time. They were a force that could endure, survive, and maybe even thrive against the impossible. The grove seemed to breathe again, the air alive with quiet energy, as and held their place at the center. The alignment waited for the next step, and knew he would not fail, could feel the grove shifting around them. The air thrummed with energy, bright pulses running through the vines, flowers, and even the ground beneath their feet. The alignment was near its peak, and he knew that this moment was more than important. It was everything. The weight of responsibility pressed against his chest, but alongside it there was a thrill he had never known. He was not just surviving this night. He was part of something vast, something alive. Sai's met his, glowing faintly with the silver light of her life energy. There was urgency there, but also trust, a fragile hope that trembled in rhythm with the pulse of the grove. She reached out and placed both hands over his chest, right above his heart. Felt warmth radiate from her, not just physical heat, but energy, raw and vibrant, intertwining with his own. "Now, human," she whispered, her voice trembling with intensity, "feel me completely. Let the alignment flow through us. Only together can we survive this." Nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He had faced impossible odds before, but nothing like this. This was not a test of strength, skill, or courage alone. It was a test of connection, of surrender, of trust. He closed his eyes and allowed himself to sense her fully, to feel the rhythm of her heartbeat, the subtle flickers of energy flowing from her veins, the pulse of life that she carried like a fragile flame. He matched it, he moved with it, he became part of it. The grove responded instantly. The flowers brightened, glowing in patterns that danced around them. Vines stretched and curled as if reaching toward the human and the guardian, and the air vibrated softly with the rhythm of their union. Could feel's pulse growing steadier under his touch, the tension in her body easing as he mirrored her energy. For the first time, felt a connection deeper than any battle, deeper than any friendship, deeper than any triumph he had known. He felt alive in a way that was more than survival. It was creation, participation, presence. The alignment was no longer just an event. It was a living symphony, and he and were its instruments. She whispered again, softer this time, "Do not fear. Trust it, trust me, trust yourself." Opened his eyes and looked at her, really looked. In her gaze, he saw vulnerability and strength, fear and hope, fragility and power, all blended together in a being who had chosen to trust him completely. And he realized in that instant that he could not fail her. He would not fail them. The pulse of the grove intensified, wrapping around them like a living current. Let the energy move through him, through his hands, through his very soul. He felt warmth, light, and motion, a sensation that was both terrifying and beautiful. Every part of him vibrated in harmony with, and he knew she felt the same. Their connection was no longer just emotional. It was physical, spiritual, and cosmic all at once. The shadows that had haunted the edges of the grove faded as the light of their union strengthened. The air shimmered, the water in the pool rippled with iridescent colors, and the jungle itself seemed to breathe in relief. Could feel relaxing against him, her tension melting away, replaced by trust, awe, and something infinitely tender. We did it," she whispered, her voice trembling with wonder. Together, you and I. Smiled, exhausted but exhilarated. He had not just survived a test or a trial, he had become part of something greater, something eternal. And in that moment, holding and feeling the pulse of the grove around them, he understood the power of connection, the strength of trust, and the beauty of unity. The alignment reached its peak. Light, energy, and life flowed through them, merging and expanding outward, touching every corner of the grove. Knew, without doubt, that this night would never be forgotten. It had changed him, and perhaps even the world itself. As the light slowly softened, the grove settling into quiet hums and glowing patterns held her close and whispered, "We are ready. Whatever comes next, we face it together." Rested her head against his chest, her breath easing, her pulse steady, and for the first time felt the profound weight and joy of being truly human, alive, connected, and capable of love and courage that could survive even the impossible. The grove settled into an almost sacred silence. The glowing flowers and vines that had once trembled in uncertainty now shone steadily, as if the forest itself were breathing in relief. Stood beside, still holding her hands, still feeling the pulse of life and energy that had flowed through them. But now it was steadier, calmer, more certain. Lifted her head, her silver hair falling softly over her shoulders. Her eyes shone, not with fear or urgency, but with awe and gratitude. She looked at as though seeing him fully for the first time, and he felt something he had never expected. The quiet, overwhelming power of being appreciated, trusted, and believed in. "You saved more than me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You saved this world. You didn't just endure the alignment, you became part of it. You carried the spark that could survive where many others would fail." Swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words sink deep into his chest. He had never considered himself special. He had survived, yes, fought, yes, and wandered countless worlds, yes. But he had always believed he was alone, small, insignificant. Yet here, in this grove with her, he realized the truth. Being human meant more than strength or skill. It meant hope, courage, and connection. It meant the ability to rise to challenges no one else could. The pool of water nearby shimmered with renewed light, reflecting their images as if the forest itself had blessed them. Noticed that the flowers were now taller, brighter, more vibrant than before. Even the shadows that had lurked in the grove seemed gone, banished by the unity they had created. The forest hummed softly, acknowledging the bond they had forged and the courage he had shown. Stepped closer and placed her hands on his chest again, her touch warm and steady. "I was afraid I would be alone, afraid the world would end without this chance," she admitted. Her voice was soft, but the truth in it struck with surprising force. "But you did not hesitate, you trusted, you felt, you acted. That is what makes you extraordinary, human." Felt a lump rise in his throat. For the first time in his life, he did not feel the need to fight, to prove himself, or to survive alone. Instead, he felt pride, connection, and peace. "I just did what needed to be done," he replied quietly. Yet he knew, deep down, it was more than that. He had given himself fully, not just to the moment, but to someone else, to a world, to a life that depended on him. His eyes glimmered as she smiled faintly, a soft curve that seemed to illuminate everything around them. "No human has ever done this. No human has ever become part of the alignment like you have. You are remarkable." Looked around the grove. The night sky above had cleared, stars twinkling like a million tiny lanterns. The air smelled sweet and pure, filled with the quiet harmony of life. He realized that their actions had not just saved, or even the forest. They had restored balance, created hope, and proven that humanity could rise to challenges beyond imagining. A sense of calm washed over him. He had discovered something far greater than victory or survival. He had discovered that humanity, with all its flaws and limits, carried a spark of resilience, courage, and empathy that could change worlds. And in that moment, holding his hand and feeling her pulse steady against his, he understood that he was part of something eternal, a living proof that humans could endure, connect, and create life even in the most impossible circumstances. Rested her head against his shoulder, her breathing even and calm. Wrapped his arm around her, feeling the warmth, the life, the energy that now flowed between them like a river. The grove shimmered softly, a living witness to what had happened. "Thank you," she murmured, "for trusting, for feeling, for being human." Smiled faintly, finally understanding the truth of her words. Being human was not just about surviving. It was about hope, courage, and love that could endure anything. And as the forest glowed around them, alive and eternal, knew that he had finally found his place in the universe, not as a lone wanderer, but as a human capable of greatness, capable of connection, capable of shaping destiny itself. The night was still, but and, standing together in the heart of the grove, knew that the spark of humanity had burned brighter than ever, and it would never fade.